There's a fundamental asymmetry in cyberspace. Right? Some countries have natural cyber defenses. Think of cyber war between North Korea and the United States. Good example. North Korea has what, like 10 computers? It's really hard to attack them in cyberspace. They don't have much cyberspace. The United States is naturally vulnerable in cyberspace because we are so reliant on cyberspace. Right? This isn't new. Different countries have had natural vulnerabilities on land because of the terrain, or natural defenses because of mountains, on sea. But in cyberspace, there is a terrain. There are countries that are more or less vulnerable based on just how they use cyberspace, how much it permeates their society. Right? I talked about that attackers have a natural advantage in cyberspace. I think we need to start talking about cyber war treaties. There's a really interesting book on cyber war. It's called Cyber War, and it's by Richard Clarke. Richard Clarke was the first U.S. cybersecurity policy advisor for the president, appointed under Bush. The first half of the book is full of cyber war hype, and I recommend that nobody read it. The second half of the book is full of really interesting recommendations of cyber war policy, and I recommend that everybody read it. It's a really hard book to review because you want to rip it in half and throw the first half away. He spends a lot of time talking about cyber war treaties. He's done a lot more thinking about this than I have. He has a lot more experience on nuclear treaties and other weapons treaties. And he looks at what are the similarities, what are the differences, how they might work. What international organizations might be able to negotiate and facilitate these treaties. And you can imagine the sorts of treaties you might want. No first use of cyber weapons. That sounds like a good one. Minimization of collateral damage. No attacks against civilian targets or civilian infrastructure. No unaimed weapons. Big problem with cyber weapons. It's hard to aim them. Weapons that self-destruct at the end of conflicts. That sounds like a good idea. Right? So we can think about different cyber war treaties we might want to negotiate. Verification is hard. It's really hard. It's going to be hard to verify these treaties. Think about how hard it is to verify chemical weapon treaties. How countries try to hide their chemical weapon facilities. It's going to be way easier to hide a cyber weapons facility. Right? It could be in somebody's basement. It doesn't take a lot of infrastructure. So how do we verify these treaties is going to be a big problem. And there is starting to be talk about cyber war treaties. Right now, the United States is doing a lot of blocking of treaties in cyberspace. I think because the government thinks that it has an advantage and wants to keep that advantage, and that treaties would lessen that advantage. Seems dumb and short-sighted, but that's sort of par for the course. Because really, we are right now in the first years of a cyber war arms race. And I don't think that's going to serve anybody's interest. If cyber weapons start proliferating, you're going to have accidents. You're going to have things go off that we don't want. It's going to be unstabilizing. Right? Limits on the number of cyber weapons. That'd be a neat treaty if we can figure out what that means. And there's a lot of value I think, in negotiating these treaties, even if they are unenforceable. The general consensus of international treaties of weapons is that they have enormous value even if they are breached. That negotiating them, signing them, is a powerful thing. And even something as simple as a hotline between cyber war commands in different countries, I think, would be enormously valuable. But we need to do a more important thing. We need to decide what's an offensive action in cyberspace. We don't know what war looks like, and we need to have some common language. Right? I mean, sort of think of the gamut. Defending yourself, okay, that's clearly not offensive action. That's okay. Eavesdropping, not offensive. Countries have been doing that since the beginning of time. They're not going to stop. So that has to be normal. Building up attack capabilities, as long as they're general, that seems okay. More problematic is something called preparing the battlefield. This is a military doctrine of going into a potential battlefield and getting ready. Not doing anything but preparing. It's widely believed, Seymour Hersh of The New Yorker has reported this and of others, that both the U.S. and China have been infiltrating each other's networks and leaving logic bombs and doing this under the auspices of preparing the battlefield. This seems much more offensive. I mean, if we learn that some country, came into our country and buried bombs in various places, didn't set them off, just buried them just in case, I think we'd be annoyed. We'd say, hey, you can't do that. These logic bombs seem to be about the same. Right? Offensive actions like Stuxnet, are clearly offensive. And are probably, under any normal definition of the term, acts of war. We might not decide to declare war because of them, but I think countries would be justified in doing so. We also need to talk about what the rules of engagement are in cyber war. We don't know. We actually have no idea what the rules of engagement are. There are basic rules of engagement in warfare. Armies have to wear uniforms. Remember the problems we have in cyberspace is with knowing who the attacker is. When Israel attacked Syria, the Syrians could look up, see what was painted on the airplanes and know who was attacking them. When Israel attacked Iran, Iran couldn't do that. The reason armies wear uniforms, it's kind of twofold. It's a sort of interesting look at the history of uniforms. It is to prevent friendly fire. You paint your planes with your colors so you don't shoot at them. So these are your assets and they're okay. You also do that to separate who the military is from the civilians. Giving your military uniforms protects your civilians, because then they are non-combatants. Right? This is why guerrilla warfare is so unstabilizing in countries, because there's no clear separation of combatants and non-combatants. And that gets very ugly very quickly. We saw that in Iraq. We sort of see that in Afghanistan. We see that again and again. We need to talk about at what level of command these cyber war decisions are being made. Because these weapons are so dangerous, so unstabilizing, so much of a potential for them to affect collateral targets. Decisions about them should be made at a very high level. One of my worries in the United States is that you have people like colonels making these decisions, when it should be much closer to the president, of whether we prepare the battlefield in China, for example. We need to better understand cyber mercenaries. Except for some recent exceptions in the United States, with contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan, mercenaries have kind of fallen out of favor. That countries have their own armies and don't hire mercenaries. I think that went out after the Renaissance. We are seeing more mercenaries in cyberspace, that hiring attackers, hiring people to build weapons is more common. Again, because of this democratization of ability. So we need to figure out how to deal with cyber mercenaries. We also need to figure out how to deal with these non-state actors. Right? That a lot more of these conflicts are coming from non-state. And non-state actors are hard. If you think about the American response to 9/11, We were attacked by a terrorist organization. We turned around and invaded Afghanistan. You think about it, it seems pretty dumb, but there's nothing else the military can do. When the president said, we were attacked, attack back, the only thing a military knows how to do is attack a country. So they picked a country that was the closest to the closest to their target and attacked that. Right? That's a really lousy way to deal with a non-state actor. We need a more surgical capability when you were being attacked by a group of people, an organization, and not by a country. Because more and more of these cyber conflicts are not going to be nation against nation. Asymmetric warfare was hard in the real world. It's even harder in cyberspace. But we need to figure it out. And mostly, I think we need to stop feeding our fears. Right? This isn't the end of the world. We all in the security community are used to attacks in cyberspace. General public seems not to be. And the more we can do to keep the debate reasonable, I think the better off we all are. So I think I'm going to put down the microphone now, and I'm not in charge of what happens next, but something will happen next. Thank you very much.